The first thing I will say is I am not an expert at BIM. All I know about BIM is it costs us too much and no one wants to pay for it. So other than that, and I find the whole system is remarkable. It's enabled us to do all kinds of great things and move forward faster and do better work. But I think the real test of the value we can create through BIM is yet to be untapped. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, and where I see this whole system, this technology, and working together, making life better in the future, and what are some interesting challenges. Yeah, there's a forward, is there? There we go. So today, most of BIM, I think, from our experience, has been focused in architecture, engineering, construction, how to deliver a building. I think most people would agree on that. I don't think we've tapped into the operations of buildings. There's a number of reasons why, as Clint mentioned earlier, which was kind of interesting. Most of the buildings that are owned commercially, and now, of course, towards the rental model of residential, are owned by large organizations that don't build buildings, don't design buildings, and struggle sometimes just to manage buildings. So oftentimes everything is a third party. So what's interesting is most buildings are being developed by third parties. And the third party job is to control capital because it's the most important thing at the front end, is to deliver against program and maintain a budget, or be heroes and reduce the budget. So the thought of a third party in charge of managing the construction of a building to care at least a little bit about how to manage a building or what a building can do later is slim to none. So they love to beat us up on the fees, and they love to squeeze out the models at the end for free, pass them on and do whatever. So there's all this kind of conflict, and I think most of it's just coming from there's very little participation by building owners in what they will arrive at or how they'll end up at the end of the day. And if they knew what they were getting at the end of the day and how much they could use it, and I'll talk about a lot of that today, I think you're going to see a significant change come very quickly. But it's up to all of us to educate, because the third party is given a pretty clear mandate. Get the building up for as little as possible, make it whatever it is, and make it successful. So successful does not mean the day after we all leave and you've got to operate, manage the building. I think the other thing to do, which is interesting, is yes, we will save money through BIM operating buildings, but there's a much greater challenge that I see overall in the market. We are becoming far more urban, in some ways by choice, and in other ways because we have less choice. What I find very stimulating and interesting is my kids are making choices for the first time in North America. That generation is choosing things because of quality of life. Most of my generation and the ones prior to that came to North America thinking about a quality of life that would be better, and maybe it was. But most of the time we're convinced by marketing and all kinds of other things to do things because of quantity, not quality. We want a bigger house. I've never met a couple that bought their first house that didn't say it's just a starter home. It's just not that important, but we'll get something better, don't you worry. And better often means further away. And our quality of life just gets worse and worse and worse, and we're convinced by someone that we should move, on average in the US, 7.5 times the family moves. An adult moves. And in Canada, we're a little better. We're at 4.2 or 4.3. In Europe, it's like 1.6. People know their neighborhoods. They know their communities. They choose a quality of life and one that is very, very urban. So I think that's going to start changing how BIM can influence buildings. We need buildings to become facilitators of positive change. And I'll get into that more in some detail. What is interesting as we see change in buildings, as we become more urban, we are also going to see a breaking down of typical typologies of buildings. So why can't someone work within the building they live in. And that doesn't mean within their unit. We've all tried that. Everybody's going to work at home, whatever. But there should be places where people can collaborate within their own residence, within other forms of building. Offices need to start to facilitate all kinds of positive change and differentiate themselves from typical, you lease that, you pay me, you get this space, you fit it out, I'm the landlord, I collect your money and operate the building. So I think common services are huge. It's a completely untapped resource. As many of you may know, the CRTC does not rule what happens inside a property line. It only rules what happens outside of a property line. Why aren't landlords building faster, selected, or proprietary bandwidth, hugely quick systems within their building to facilitate positive growth within businesses? I don't understand why they're not, but we're getting there, we're pushing. All kinds of things can go on within buildings that aren't happening today. We do all the work for WeWork, so in Canada. And what's interesting is they see the value of buildings that landlords don't. They see that if we get in and fit it out and make everything state-of-the-art, make everything great, make it cool, make it stimulant, and make it fantastic collective, collaborative space, collision space, that everyone will rent our space, and we can double the rent, because people will pay twice as much. So if the rent by the landlord is $30, we can charge $60 on the equivalent, and no one will mind. And the landlords laughed at them. They're up to over 5 million square feet. They're going to lease 2 to 3 million feet in Toronto alone. They're taking every single space they can get in New York. And who are their lead tenants? We all think they're small, up and coming people. I can use the boardroom. Their biggest tenant in New York City is Google. Their second biggest is IBM. They're way out ahead of landlords. They're transforming real estate. And the landlords are scratching their heads going, how do they do it? Well, they put in state-of-the-art meeting rooms. They put in fantastic cafes. They put in all kinds of tools that we can use together. All those things within a building, they're going to come, and they need to be monitored. They need to be costed. They need to be, someone's got to go onto an app and organize a meeting room. They'll do it for you. Why aren't landlords doing it now? Why aren't we making buildings that we make today high performance, better performance, enabling and facilitating positive change? So we need to look at buildings very, very differently. And whether they're residential or commercial, retail, everything is merging. That's the other thing that's happening that's quite interesting. We put these, what we call large urban rooms in a lot of our buildings as social collision, fabulous space. It's only because we want that. When I say we're becoming more urban, we want to be more collective. We're tired of living alone and driving in our car alone for hours in the day. People want change. They want engagement. They can be alone with one of these 5-6 hours a day all the time, but they need then the opposite. They need to collect. We need to work together. One of the best definitions of how the world would change that I've ever heard in a long time was by accident from a guy from IBM who said, our IBMers can't move our company forward anymore. Their expertise is too shallow, but what they are good at is management of ideas. So now what we do is we take 100 people to create something to move forward, and each of the 100 has to be an expert in the information on the head of a pin, in a very, very finite slot. So if they don't work together, nothing advances, nothing moves. So IBM knows it, the big tech companies of the world know it. They have to bring people together to exchange and educate one another. Typically, this is what used to happen in an office on the left. What we're trying to do in the Innovation Center building that we're doing is we're trying to take a building apart and then put it back together in a very set of different sort of terms, where we have places that you go to work, and it's not a new model, I must admit. The monks were doing it 1,000 years ago. The whole notion of the cloister where the monastery was very, very interesting. There was places to collect, to be social, places to move away and do work, places to do research in quiet, and places to converse about work or about the books or whatever they were doing. They had a pretty good, interesting model. The same model is the model used by all the first universities, Oxford, Cambridge, Trinity, and then it spread through to the United States and other places. Then what we did in the 60s and 70s is we thought the university should be a collection of buildings out on a farmland, and we called it a campus. It doesn't work very well. It's not very stimulant. It's not a great stimulus. And of course, we're now bringing them back and trying to intensify. But all these things are going to happen in buildings. Why aren't landlords facilitating them? Why aren't owners of buildings that have occupants trying to change them? So what we do is we facilitate a place where you move away to do work, where you actually exchange ideas, which is what we call the exchange. And then the nexus is the whole social aspect of being somewhere. Life is coming to work, work is going back to where we live. Things are merging. So we're trying to make buildings that have a social consciousness, are cool, are fun to be in, are a stimulant, but at the same time, they're getting very, very complicated. The model doesn't work. You draw a lease line, you've separated people. So if you're going to make common element, you've got to manage it. And I think BIM has a tremendous role in this. How to manage the transformation from a lease line, which is easy, you measure it, you charge a guy a bill, to how do we start to share all of these other amenities, who pays for it, how do they become a profit center? Interesting example, the old BC Gas building in BC was sold to developers. So everybody came to look at it when they were moving. And everybody said, we've got to take out that big multi-theater, the rake seating multi-seat theater, state-of-the-art place. Take that out, fill in the floors, that's all leasable area. We can't afford to have it in the building. One guy, the guy who bought it, left it in the building. The average rental rate, net rental rate for the building is about $28. His equivalent in rent, charging out time to be in that auditorium, is $120. He saw the value. No one else did. Every person that I looked at the building with said, fill that in, take it out, this is crazy, just lease the space. So you're going to start to see more and more and more of this. And that's just one tool. There's 1,000 tools that we should be exploring. This building is I can tell you, this is like pushing noodles uphill. When you have ideas like this and you talk to a developer, it is outrageous, the stuff you get back. Who's paying for that? What do you mean, social space? I said, well, they like the building, they'll stay in it. So what? I need more leasable area. You know the typical, right? It's just on and on and on. Interestingly enough, they're now on 4 shortlists for very interesting clients who in each case came back and said, we don't care what the net rent is. The building is measurably better by design for our people. So the landlord looks at me, the developer says, so we could charge higher rents for less space and still be ahead. Yes. Perfect. Anyway, it's starting to happen. It's just like a push. However, this is the building. It's being built down by the waterfront. This was our first design. It's unfortunately changed a little bit in some ways. Some for the better, some for the worse, but we keep going. This is, I guess, a great challenge I've talked a little bit about already. What we have now is you create the information, we'll pay you as architects, engineers, and maybe builders, and then we get that information and we steal it from you at the end, right? So, and on the way through, what's worse than just stealing it from us, the models and all the rest, is now they want us to change it, they want us to put in the tenant stuff, they want to, like, it just keeps going and no one wants to pay anything, right? So it's this great dogged fight. It used to be like the CCDC2 contracts. Thank God I haven't done one of those in about 25 years. But it's a very different world. And what we have to do as an organization, or as a group of people, disparate interests, we've got to bring it together and say, what is the real value in this from an operating sense, from a saving money, from doing things more efficiently. The tenants would love to know that we're all being paid to build a better model, to build a more interesting model, to collect better data, to manage things better. The landlords are starting to get it, but again, they rarely build their own buildings. So it's a huge challenge. I think we're going to see change. Facilities are coming around a little bit, as you guys all know, and I'm sure some of you are within the facilities. That's good, but if you could influence the model from the first day, you'd probably get a much better model. You'd probably get much better information. This is that a building that Clint was talking about, but it was what was very interesting again, and we see more of this. We don't just see it, we encourage it. A lot of our work comes from tenants or people that occupy buildings, and they demand of a developer a different response by architects, by engineers, by what we leave behind. And they're demanding change. And if they're big enough, like TELUS, the developer says, yes, it's a wonderful thing. You know, if the 800-pound gorilla is big enough, we see tremendous change, and we get behind these tenants. So many of the buildings we do, Clint talked about, we've done headquarters for Loblaws, BMW, Microsoft, all kinds of people, many companies. The Sun Life, the new Sun Life Tower is ours. All kinds of stuff is driven by occupants and HR telling the company executive they want change, they want something better. That filters down, filters back up, and the developer's told what to do, and then of course he's not sure how to do it, and people like all of us get better involved at a different level, and we're considered in a different way. I think treated with a lot more respect when the occupant is driving the bus. So it's an interesting thing. This building has, we're very proud of it. It is one most energy efficient building in North America for, I think it's 3 years in a row now. It's won just about every award it can, which is great. And TELUS is getting a lot out of it. What was interesting, what was a breakthrough on this building, was demanding, TELUS demanded at this time, this was a long time ago now, that this building have a non-proprietary backbone automation system in it. And normally what we're faced with is you either get Siemens or Johnson's or whatever, and they go in, and any tenant that wants to interface or scale up from the system is forced to use Siemens, Johnson, whatever. This is a non-proprietary. It was very, very interesting. It allowed smaller companies to develop software that TELUS could use to better manage their own facility, but also make life better. I think I'll get to that more towards the end, but you're going to see buildings being, we're going to get demands that buildings make the quality of life better. And that's going to happen very quickly. With the last major step in buildings making life better was air conditioning. That was done in the 60s and 70s. We haven't done much since with buildings. I think this is our challenge. Most of us know all about this. We're trying to push for more of this in our office. You know, what's key to operating a building at the end of the day is collecting data, storing it, understanding it, and being able to use it to make things better. We simply, in most of our buildings, most buildings built, have not nearly enough data points, don't take in nearly enough information, and can't disseminate it, can't use it in real time. I mean, I still see people in high-tech buildings that we've done, they're high performance, really well put together, lots of technology in them, and the guy shows up to change a single light bulb. And every ballast in the place is IP addressable. I said, buddy, have you looked at how much power the other lights are using? No. Well, if you did, you'd know which ones are going to fail this week. You could have brought 4 bulbs and changed them all. No, he'll come back 2 days later. No, that one's gone now, and he waits for the phone call. And it's all available. They just don't know how to dig it out. They don't know how to get it. And we have this other problem, which is interesting. People that are often handed buildings have not a clue what to do with all this stuff. Anyway, that's another challenge. It's changing. I think larger organizations are changing, but most people have not a clue how to operate a building. The better you make it, the harder it is to operate, and usually the less it performs unless you get in and almost run it with them. So that's been a real challenge too. Add technology, we have meltdown. It's great. This is that One York project, which just opened. It's now on the top of the building is Sun Life. But it was a very interesting set of challenges here because all the tenants are big, They're all pretty powerful. So you get CIBC Mellon, you get Hoop, of course, Sun Life. And they all have different demands. They're all looking to do different things. And boy, was it great to see a non-proprietary backbone and be able to augment or scale up all the technology in the building almost instantly. All the tenants end up utilizing it. And of course, people use buildings in different ways. And where this building, I think, failed, from my perspective, is there's not enough social. There's a ton of retail at the bottom, and of course, there's 1,500 apartment units all connected. That's all one project, a little over 2 million feet. But it would have been better, I think, to make it more urban, a little more interconnected at the lower levels. And we did some things that are pretty neat. All the people in the condos have an amenity that they don't have to pay for, health club, but it's commercially operated and commercially rented, and all the membership, all the occupants in the office building also share it. There's a big roof garden around all 3 towers, and with a food court and all kinds of food offerings. So people are intermingling and mixing all the time. We're seeing more and more and more of this. The demand for mixed use is good. So don't become an expert on an office building or a residential, because they're starting to merge, just like hotels. Who would have thought that half the rooms rented in the month of July in Toronto were not in hotels? That was quite good. I think there's a whole one way that you'll get BIM to influence more people and become more important, and of course develop then faster, is that if the average person can start to use it within the building. So we're now working on things with people whereby you can adjust the color temperature of your lights, or you can ask the lights to follow the color temperature of the outside light, or you can adjust your temperature. Every occupant would control their own temperature, and they do it off their smartphone. So these are things that you start to build up over time based on the system of the building. If it becomes more important to each of us, the systems become more important, and it's a lot easier to sell and integrate and get someone to pay for the value and invest the time and energy and money into them. This is what I was talking about just in terms of the control of lighting. We know from all kinds of studies we do the importance of daylight. Of course, developers want us to have bigger and bigger floor plates. Tenants are demanding larger and larger floor plates on the office side. Very difficult to do. As land gets more expensive and smaller, you end up tending to have huge dimensions from core to glass. We, of course, go with 11 ceilings, not 9. We get more light in. We measure all those good things. But you still, the further you move from the glass, the less connected you are to the actual change in light or color temperature of the light outside. And we know it's a huge stimulant. In Europe, they regulate core to glass dimensions, and they also regulate how few people can be on the glass in an enclosed space. So Germany, Austria, all kinds of the northern climates in Europe, all regulate. Usually it's less than 20% of the outside wall can be utilized by an enclosed space. So everybody gets access to the light. Nobody's too far from the windows. We still build these huge cavernous things, call them wonderful office buildings. So what we're looking at now is how to bring natural light deeper into the plan. We've done a lot of work on daylight harvesting, but we're also now starting to look at the benefits of being able to change the color temperature with LED lighting to follow the sun and to follow the day through deep back into the plan. So, and we're allowing people to change that. Some people enjoy better, work better in certain types of light. Not that we'll film them, but, we're also trying to learn how people work more effectively. So it's interesting. But empower people. The more we do this, the more BIM is going to matter. The more the information collected within the building will matter. I think everybody would sort of agree with this, not to say much about it, but it is, it's a grind, I can tell you. Now that we have moved into one of the buildings we designed and have all the technology and just to watch, and I'm not picking on the landlord, but it's so easy to manage that building, and yet we're so far removed from the capabilities of the building on a day-to-day basis. To come in on a holiday Monday and the building's supposed to be all off and all the lights are on. And I'm like, what? Guys, it's a holiday. We knew about it a long time ago. Anyway, there's all kinds of easy things to do, and same with equipment. You know, we can, depending on how much data you collect, you can determine the half-life, exactly what's needed on every piece of equipment. I used to rebuild MGs and old British cars when I was a kid, getting ready for my 16th birthday. I had 2 or 3 of them, I think, completely rebuilt, ground up. And I learned a lot of things. You've got a loose fan belt, you're going to destroy the bearings. If the bearings go, the fan, you know, the alternator goes. Everything just goes on. We can see and know what these motors are doing, how efficient they are, what the problems are on one of these. We can follow it. We're just not collecting the data. We can stop early failures. We can get much greater life out of most of the equipment. And we can run the systems much more efficiently. Well, this is pretty obvious. If you could do it off a computer, it'd be a lot better often. You know, one thing, I was asked to give a talk once to the property managers of the largest owners in the country. And one thing that they said to me, which was quite interesting, is they all had different approaches to managing properties. They all had different ways of engaging with tenants, tenant engagement, all the good stuff. But at the end, they all agreed, sitting around a table with drinks at around 8 o'clock, they said, yes, we all have one thing in common. The most important guy in the building operator, usually has had a criminal record, loves to sit on the lawn chair on the roof and smoke pot, and probably didn't finish grade 11. That we have in common. And I thought, oh, that's excellent. Perfect. No wonder the buildings are well run. But anyway, it is, not to pick on building managers, some of them are fantastic guys. But when you get a good one, what a difference. But why are we relying so heavily on them? I guess that's the question, really. The other thing that's, as I pointed out earlier, is, you know, how do we see this into the future increasing quality of life? If we don't start measuring our work and what we do relative to that, we will fail. Because that's what it's all about. That's why BlackBerry went down, because they didn't get access to apps. Why do we need all these apps? I don't know. Someone thinks it's a quality of life issue. When people believe it is, they move. They move quickly. And if the building isn't as good as one wants or thinks, they'll move out. They'll leave their jobs. You know, what used to keep people at work a long time, you know, for over long periods of time, might have been a pension, might have been whatever. A lot of that's disappearing. You know, we're treating people differently. We're investing less in them, and they're doing the same back. So if you look at the transformation within the employment, the new millennials are having 5 and 6 jobs before they're 30. My generation didn't do that. You know, a lot of people looked for where's the best pension, where's the best this, and you stuck it out through hell or high water, and you kind of sort of smirked and smiled every now and then. It was like, you know, the floggings will continue till morale improves. They don't put up with it anymore. They just get up and walk out. They're not interested. They're looking for quality of life. And that means urban, that means within buildings, that means compressing, condensing life, live, work, play. And it means the building better perform well for their health, for their social needs, psychological needs, and productivity. Because they also want to be more productive than our generation did. I think we'll save a lot of money and make a lot of people happy if BIM takes a much greater role. But let's get paid for it too. Okay, thanks very much.